Well, this week, Iraqi officials, as Greg pointed out, made it clear that they intend to try Saddam's cohorts sooner rather than later, and they held the pretrial hearing today for the notorious Chemical Ali, as well as a former defense minister. Now, some suggest the newly liberated nation is far from ready for such proceedings, while others say it's high time Iraqi justice caught up with Saddam's henchmen. Joining me now with more, American University Law School's Paul Williams, a former State Department legal advisor. Let's first talk, by the way, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk first about whether the country is ready for doing it on its own or whether it needs the auspices of the United Nations. If Iraq is to try the various people for genocide and war crimes, is it ready?
Iraq is ready for trying these individuals, and I think it's essential that Iraq try these individuals within the next 4 to 6 months.
What about the complaint that, no, they're not ready, they need to wait? What's wrong with waiting?
Well, this is a common refrain that you hear from the international community. They like to have their trials in Western Europe, in The Hague. They like to have them take 2 or 3 years. Those types of trials are very destabilizing. The Iraqis, just like they need an election, they need a trial to delegitimize the insurgency.
Well, they're also grossly ineffective. You take a look at the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. I mean, it's still going on. The guy has managed to figure out how to throw dirt in the wheels of justice. Is the United Nations itself competent to try, A, to comment on these things, and B, try to run them?
I would argue not only that they're not competent to comment on these trials, they have actually refused to provide assistance to the Iraqi judges who have sought to, in a sense, learn the lessons from the Yugoslav judges. You mentioned the Milosevic trial. That's very important. Milosevic, who represents himself, is the most popular politician in Serbia. His party is likely to control the parliament in the next elections. You cannot give Saddam Hussein a 2-year platform to destabilize Iraq. You need to do it quickly, you need to do it efficiently, and you need to do it fairly, but not the way the Yugoslav tribunal is run.
You just mentioned that the UN basically is not providing aid to the Iraqis. Isn't it the case that the United States said, okay, we're going to support you with these Milosevic trials, with these Serbian war trials? And again, the tribunals have been an embarrassment.
What's very ironic about that is that the Americans were the ones who essentially stood up the Yugoslav tribunal and the Rwanda tribunal. They seconded personnel, they provided almost all of the initial funding, and now it's the time that the Iraqis really could use some of the benefit from the judges in the Yugoslav tribunal, sort of what's gone wrong and some of the things that have gone right. And Kofi Annan has expressly forbidden any member who works for the International Tribunal from helping out the Iraqis.
You can't look at something like this without thinking, for some reason, Kofi Annan's trying to protect people. Am I being unfair here?
Well, I think what Kofi Annan has realized is that he wants to keep sort of the use of force within the UN mandate, and clearly the Americans have moved ahead without him. He now wants to sort of keep justice within the purview of the UN. The Americans and the Iraqis have moved without him, and they have a huge oil for food problem, and I think they're a little bit worried about being pulled too far into this, giving it legitimacy, and then having the Iraqi trials turn and start to identify individuals who are closely associated with the UN as, in a sense, complicit in this
other
process.
words, what you're saying is they're trying to have a cover-up without calling it a cover-up.
Well, I think they're very concerned about the success of the tribunal.
They're concerned that it will succeed.
Not only with the Iraqis, but also if you have a full and free hearing from a legitimate tribunal, and it starts to include references to individuals within the UN who allowed the oil for food payments to go through, who limited the ability of the Kurds to tap into those payments as they should have been able to, you'll have yet more problems for the UN. This way they can delegitimize it.
Final question, is it your sense that the United States is going to be able to provide sufficient funding and help so that these can be conducted freely and fairly? That is the trials of Chemical Ali and others, including Saddam.
Yeah, and that's what, at the end of the day, the good news is the Iraqi judges are excellent. The Americans have put the resources behind. Saddam will have the most free and fair trial that any Iraqi has had in the past 50 years. It will meet international standards, and we'll be learning a lot of very interesting things as these trials unfold.
Paul Wilson, thanks. That was great.
Thank you.